friends, I'm Lauren Bernick, and I'm flipping the script about growing older. My guests have been influencers since before that was even a thing. Welcome to the Anti-Aging Podcast. Welcome to Age Like a Badass Mother. Ericka Eller is a certified life and health coach focusing on functional nutrition, stress management, and burnout recovery at Soul Space Tucson. She understands that everything is connected and we can't separate our life into one broken cause of the story that our body is telling us. She loves working with women through a grace-based approach to find their next best steps and help them see the joy that lies in today. As the COO of Soul Space Tucson, Ericka doesn't believe in balance, but in being intentional in life as our life seasons change. She is a mom to 3 adult children, a recent widow, and is learning a new rhythm while walking through grief. Please help me welcome Ericka Eller. I love your name. You have the best name, Ericka Eller.
I do. Thank you.
You really do. So I'm so glad to talk to you today. Do you want to tell the story of how we met?
Yeah. It's a fun story. And I can't quite remember, I think it was was it 2018,
I think
2019?
so. I was trying to
I can't
remember. I think
remember.
so.
But yeah, we had both gone to a conference in Chicago and we were both exhibitors there. And it was a pharmacy, like a for pharmacists. And I can't remember which one it was, but we were both vendors there. I was working
I
with
was
the
actually a
supplement company.
speaker.
You were, yes. But you
Yeah.
did you have a
I'm
booth
sure I had
at
a booth
table as
too.
well for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
journal?
Hmm.
Um, but I just remember you had the brightest smile and you were just so friendly. And at that time, I had just started doing some elimination stuff in my own diet. And I remember we were sitting together at the same table for like breakfast. And I had asked the server if they had almond milk. And they're like, nope, fresh out. And you were like, I have oat milk. Would you like that? And you pulled out a carton from your purse. And I was like, what? And that's when I knew this woman is going to become my best friend.
Oh my God. You know what? I'm going to tell you, you're not that special. Probably 20 people could tell you the same story. Yep, we were
Aw.
sitting together and she pulled something out of her purse that I wanted to eat. No, you are special. Um, and we did bond, and we bonded over our love of reading, that we always read like 5 books at a time.
Yep.
And then I remember we went to Navy Pier and we were hanging out, and I just loved spending time with you. You were fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, you were there because your specialty is like burnout and adrenals and functional
Hmm.
nutrition. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So at that
Tell
time I was
your
working for
burnout story.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. No, I was working for kind of the guy, Dr. James Wilson, who is the person that coined the term adrenal fatigue. And he wrote the book, the 21st century stress syndrome, adrenal fatigue. And a lot of people will recognize that. But I was working for him in sales and business development for his supplements. And in that, I just got immersed into the functional nutrition world. But at the same time, when I started working there, I had just gone through a divorce. And so I was back to working full time after being a stay at home mom for 10 years. And I was doing kind of what is it, the revenge body. So it was over exercising, under eating. I wasn't sleeping well. I was getting up at 3 in the morning to exercise before I went to work, get the
That's
kids to
insane.
school, work all day, come home. I would work out again. I would usually follow up with like a 3 to 5 mile run, and then maybe I would do some more weight training or something. Kids. And so it was like that. And I lived like that, Lauren, for like almost 2 years.
That's
And then
insane.
I hit a physical burnout where what happened was I got so sick. I basically, I mean, it was almost like every infection that you could think of having, I had it. I had a bilateral ear infection. I had strep throat. I had a kidney infection, a UTI. Um, I had gotten an upper respiratory infection all at the same time. And I sounded horrible. I felt horrible. And I was out of work for about 3 weeks. Tried to go back and they sent me back home. They were like, "You sound horrible. Go home." Um, and so, in that, and while I was working for Dr. Wilson, I remember talking with him and he was like, "You realize, like, the life that you're living is what brought you here." And he was like, "This is what we teach about." And I knew it, but I guess I just didn't think the rules applied to me in that. And
Mhm.
like, I was young at that time. And so in that is when I really started to realize, okay, the lifestyle matters, the stress management matters. Um, and so really pulling everything back. I couldn't work out the way that I used to anymore. And in fact, like my naturopath was like, "I just want you walking. And let's start with 15 minutes a day. I don't want you to do anything else." And then I was able to like move into yoga. But through that process, I had started coaching and people wanted to know what I was doing to lose weight. And I still think about that and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, how many women did I like lead astray?" But I had caught it because I realized in the coaching piece, people just wanted, I was like, "Okay, well, here's what I did. Do that." And I noticed a pattern that all the women that wanted the help were the executives, high functioners. They were pushing themselves. They had kids at home still. They were working long hours and it was backfiring. So, kind of the same way that it was backfiring on me, it was backfiring on them. They were noticing, like, I'm gaining weight. Like, this shouldn't be happening, right? Eli, I feel so much more tired. My focus is off. And in that is when I thought, oh, this has to be totally different. Like, women that have a lot of stress, there has to be a completely different approach. And so that's when I went and got certified through an ICF uh,
What's
program.
ICF?
It's internet or the IFC, International Federation of Coaching.
Okay.
And so went through a coaching program that was focused in on um, health and life coaching and did that. That was kind of my first piece. And then just dove deep into the weeds with IFM, Institute of Functional Medicine, um, and really learning how what we are putting in our bodies makes a huge difference. Lifestyle matters. Are we sleeping? Like those kind of became my core tenets of how I was coaching people. But the stress management piece and helping a body that's under an immense amount of stress. So that's where I've leaned into. And ever since, I left Dr. Wilson's in 2020. After the great pandemic that it basically necessitated it. I was no longer needing to travel. There were no conferences happening, and I thought that was just kind of a good point to step away completely and focus in on
Mhm.
coaching. And then I ended up joining the Soul Space team as well, doing coaching there, and here I am.
Yeah. And so how
I
do
was like the
you help
abbreviated version.
that?
Yeah,
I know. It's hard to condense your life down, but
yeah,
so how do you help these people if they're so I just had another guest that it's kind of a very similar story. Um And but how do you help these people who are so stressed out, so high functioning, so like I have to go, go, go? How do
Mhm.
you help them? Is it more like it's probably a mental and physical thing, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's totally I mean, I think like everything that we do, we're an integrative practice at Soul Space, but everything that we do is whole body, like thinking like mind, body, spirit. Like it's all
Mhm.
connected. We can't separate it. And we see that the clients that are doing multiple things, like they're doing talk therapy, they're doing coaching, they're doing acupuncture, nutrition, they are the ones that are getting the best outcomes at a faster rate than someone that was just doing therapy or just doing coaching as a standalone or just doing acupuncture as a standalone, because we can't separate it. Mind and body, I talk about like gut brain, just that
Mhm.
access and how it's so connected. And what you're thinking is impacting your microbiome, and what's going on in your microbiome is for sure impacting what's happening. And so when we see people that are dealing with ADHD, OCD, depression, anxiety, just that constant overwhelm. A lot of times, like it's, let's pull it back, but nutrition's going to be a big piece. But the what's going on in their mind, the thoughts that they're having, and those thoughts of I need to do this, I should be doing this, I've got to do better at this. That's that the story that you're telling yourself is just one that's laden with negativity and shame, and
Mhm.
it's impacting you physically. Your brain cannot decipher the difference between a real or imagined threat. And so
Yes.
when we are saying like I'm so behind and I need to get caught up and I'm failing, I'm not succeeding at this, your brain starts the process for a stress response. And what happens is, and that's a good thing, right? We want a stress
Mhm.
response to start
Mhm.
to keep us out of danger. If you're walking onto in front of and a car is coming, right? You want to be able to move quickly.
Yes.
If someone's coming at you, like you want to be able to run. And so your body is gearing up for a fight in some way, survival. You're going to run, you're going to fight. We're not doing that. We are just tormenting ourselves with thoughts. And so that's the very first piece, like helping people to recognize like the story that you're telling yourself is keeping you stuck. And what are some other thoughts? And so I will do that like thought comparison with them where I'll say, so this is the thought that you're thinking, and they will say yes. And I will
Such
say,
as,
so
like,
like I I had someone this week, and the thought that they had was, this will never work for me. I've tried all the things before. Why is this going to be different? And having some progress, but then an obstacle comes. And so now the story, we go back to that learned behavior, that learned thought, that neural pathway that's been dug real deep in that, like, this isn't going to work. And so I had to say to this client, how does that make you feel when you say that? I was discouraged. I'm a failure. This is disgusting, that I'm back in this place. And being able to say, what could another thought be that could have a lighter, maybe a more hopeful feeling, and working with them. And sometimes like they really don't know, Lauren, like they're like, I have no idea, like what is a new thought. And so I have to let them borrow some new thoughts where I will say like, I am becoming a new version of myself. I am
mm,
doing my best. I am making a way. I will find a way to make this work for myself. Like things like that. And then I can see it like in their face when we're talking, how it's almost like the light turned on. And they're
yeah.
like, "Oh." And I'm like, "How does that feel?" Like if you carry that thought, what are the feelings that follow? And they'll be like,
Mhm.
that feels better. That feels possible. That there's, I feel like I could do this. Like this is a possibility for me. And so then we go from there, like, okay, like what are the actions? Like when you feel stuck and like you don't want to do anything. You're like, what's the point?
Mhm.
And so when you change the thought, I will say, what's one action that you can take to get closer to the results that you want? I think the other piece is I do a lot of work around core values. People don't know like what their values are, therefore they're making decisions based on whatever is happening. And so when
Interesting.
you don't have those values in place, you're saying yes to things that should never be on the table. And that was what I found for myself in that burnout piece. I felt like I must achieve a certain level of financial security. I want to climb the ladder at this, like I want to be at the top of my game. Like those were the things that I thought that I wanted. And so I was doing that. And, the aesthetic piece, like I want to look best, I want the six pack abs, like I want to be smoking hot, all of that stuff. But when it came down to it, I was like, that's not really what I want. Like, I want peace in my life. I want health. And not like where it's measured by like vanity metrics, like what's my body fat percentage, like how many abs can you see popping through? What's my size? How much do I weigh? Not that, but I want to be energetic. And now, like, my value is vitality.
Yep.
And that means I am thinking clearly. I have energy throughout the day. I don't feel like I'm gonna crash, at 2 o'clock. Um, I want to be a presence that when people encounter me, that they feel uplifted, that they are energized as well. That I'm not the wet towel, the wet blanket that's coming into the room. Like that's the value. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, those things aren't super important. Like I'm okay with having like a small, quiet life. And like I don't need all the things. Experiences matter much more to me than things. Um, and so like helping people to like pull those values out of like, but what really feels like what is necessary for you to get the life. And I have them, this is actually a fun exercise. Some people get freaked out by it, but I say, let's picture you at 80. What do you want to What do you want to look like? How do you want to feel? What are things that you're doing? Where are you living? What are things that you want to have accomplished? Or like, how do you want people to say, like, you've impacted their life? And, some people will have like the career goals and stuff, but I think at that point, it becomes a little bit more sobering of like, yeah, like how do I want to be finishing? At that point. And they get freaked out because they're like, I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow, Erica. Like, what do you mean? Like, what am I doing when I'm 80? But I'm like, we can't move forward if we don't have a vision because otherwise you're just drifting through life.
Mm, that is a good exercise.
Yeah.
And I think so many of the things that you were saying like resonated with me. And just, to start with, we had, do you know who Dr. Ellen Langer is?
The name sounds
She's a
familiar.
Harvard professor. She's the mother of mindfulness. Like she literally wrote the book on mindfulness
Hmm.
and the mind body connection. And she was just a guest on our podcast, and she talked about your body literally believes what your mind does,
Hmm.
like you were saying, doesn't know. We just did a whole podcast on that.
Yeah.
And she talked about all these different studies. One was really fascinating, the chambermaid study, where she asked these hotel housekeepers, do you exercise? And they were like, no. And then half the group, they said, you're exercising all day long. Like
Hmm.
this, vacuuming is like doing this kind of exercise and whatever, just pointed it out. And 3 months later, the ones that they told you were exercising all day long had lost like all this weight. And the ones that they didn't say that to stayed the same. I mean, that's crazy
Yeah.
just right there. It shows. And yeah, just so many things that you said just resonated. And I love the way that you're helping people. Um, what can you talk a little bit about adrenals and hormones and stress and all that? Because I know
Oh
you just
gosh.
know so much about it.
I'm like, yeah,
It
it's like people don't recognize, and I will fully admit, before I started working for Dr. Wilson, I had like, what are adrenal glands? Like, what are you talking about? I have no idea. Um, but this is based like your adrenals are responsible for a stress response. That is where cortisol is produced, right?
Where
And
are they? Where are
they are
your adrenals in your body?
on top of your kidneys, and they're like about the size of a walnut, so not very big, but they're a powerhouse piece. And so stress starts in the mind. And so a thought happens, and immediately the pituitary signals out stress response. And so that signal will go from the pituitary, but it can happen in different ways. It can go to like your thyroid, it can go to sex hormones. But what happens is it will go to the adrenal glands to create this message of we need to go into survival. And so at that point, your body is not producing or not breaking down hormones. Like they're not synthesizing in the way that they should be. Digestion is put on hold because you could be going into a time of where you're not able to eat. We don't need to be processing and burning the way that we need to. We need to hold on to all of that. And so, but what happens is that when we're stuck in that those thoughts of like, I'm always behind, I'm not good enough, I'm failing again, that message is going 24/7 to your body. When you are not sleeping, that message is going to your body. And so those adrenal glands, they get taxed. And so there's a lot of controversy now. I don't know if it's so much a controversy, but there was where people were like adrenal fatigue, like it's impossible for the adrenals, to actually like get fatigued. But what Dr. Wilson was doing in coining that term was to give people something tangible that they could imagine, where it's like it's too much. The allostatic load that your body is carrying, meaning, like one burden after another stacking on top, it becomes too much. And so at that point, that's when people start to notice that cortisol production goes way low. Cortisol is important. We want it. There should be somewhat like a bell curve that's happening where it's slowly rising right before you wake up. And then it increases, it's kind of at its max, midday, and then it starts to decrease again to prepare for sleep. But
What
a
is
lot of times,
cortisol?
cortisol is a stress hormone. And so it's like that adrenaline, the
Hmm.
epinephrine that's happening,
Okay. So
that's being produced.
you want it low, then high, then low again, because you don't
Yeah,
want
yeah.
stress when you're trying to go to sleep. The stress hormone when you're
Exactly,
trying. Okay.
exactly. And it's important to have because if we don't have it, and people that have very low production or no production, there are people that they just don't produce it anymore. And that is not a great thing.
Right.
You need that for just the energy levels. You need that for being able to respond quickly, to have. Otherwise, you're just kind of going through the day and it's almost like this blob, like
Right.
you just feel kind of like this. There's no movement, there's no inertia there.
Okay. Right.
And so it's an important piece to your survival. And that is why, like when there is a medical emergency, typically, you are injected with epinephrine. You need that to get things going. You need the glucose to flow. And a lot of people don't understand that correlation either between cortisol and blood sugar. When cortisol is high, blood sugar matches it because it is necessary. You need that blood sugar to go to your muscles quickly for quick movement.
Mm.
But what's happening is now we now have an excess of blood sugar that's not being utilized into our cells. And so it's not functioning in the way that it's supposed to function. And then that's when people notice that they are having maybe that like midsection weight gain. That's typically, you start gaining weight in places that you didn't normally gain weight. That's what's happening. And so we need those adrenals to function. It supports your immune system. It supports healthy hormone production, like sex hormone production. It impacts your digestion. Like everything is, and when I say everything's connected, everything is literally
Yes.
connected. It impacts your heart health. It impacts liver detoxification. When you are in that constant stress response, it's impacting things in such a negative way. And so my hope is to like help people to understand sleep is critical. Thoughts matter. And we've got to, regulate blood sugar to be able to have more of that healthy function. We want the adrenals to turn on when they need to, in a stress response, when there is an emergency, but we want it to rise appropriately for the event and then go back down. That's what should happen. Within 30 minutes, your cortisol level should return back to kind of its baseline. But that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing people with like some wackadoodle patterns on lab work with their cortisol, and it's impacting hormones and thyroid, and yeah, and there's so much. I'm
I
trying to
know. I
like,
know.
how do we condense it?
I
Um,
know. I know. I asked you a loaded question because I know that you could go on forever. Um, but no, I think that's good. I mean, it's really just, it's all the same thing that you're saying, that your
mhm,
thoughts matter, they connect everything.
yeah,
Okay, let's really switch gears here and talk
mhm,
about you meant I mentioned in your intro that you are a young widow.
yeah,
And How long has it been since Jeff passed away?
It's been just over a year and a half.
It's
Yeah, so
short time
yeah,
still.
18 months.
Can you tell us the whole story? Again, the I know.
Yeah,
I keep
no,
asking you these long stories, but go
no,
ahead.
and it's an important story,
It's very
and I hate that, like, my life has been so many examples of, like, this is what happens in stress, and I would tell clients, like, this could be fatal. The right level of stress, that allostatic load, there's just so much. So Jeff and I, his second marriage, um, and so we had been married 6.5 years when he passed away. So like, I don't feel like I got enough time. Um, but Jeff was just such a kind soul. And, people that met him, were like, oh, like he would do anything, like, just a selfless guy. And that in turn, that was a big piece of like his story with his work. And so he just very stressed. He was a director of HR for a very large company, an international company, but he was here in the US and he had kind of like a big portion of the US. And there wasn't like a lot of support for him. So he was like the director, but also like doing a lot of kind of like the day-to-day like HR generalist type job. And he needed support and he was asking for it. And they were kind of like, yeah, not a priority right now. So he was doing the role of maybe like four people on his
wow.
own. And that was going on for a while. And he felt like, he was in corporate America and he was like, I'm in competition, and feeling like younger people were coming in and
Mhm.
he, so like they're fresh, they're new, a lot of ideas. And he was like, I've got to keep up. But not necessarily like the story he was telling himself was, like he wasn't as good or like he didn't have uh the level of ideas or drive that they did, because Jeff was kind of like me, like, hey, I've done the time, and I'm ready for like a slower pace.
Yeah.
But his job just didn't have room for that. And another reason like why we connected was like your history, heart disease, and talking about
Mhm.
like that. And I sat in on your lecture that you had presented on at that conference. And
Mhm.
I remember just talking, I was like, I think my husband might need this. He had a history of heart disease in the family. His father died from a heart attack, had several like heart events in his life. And then Jeff had actually had two stents put in his 40s. Um, and, so like that was like a big conversation for us when
Yeah.
we met, because first of all, like
Yes.
he was 12 years older than me. And so he was like, how do you feel about this? And, at that time, I was like, we don't know that you're going to be the first to go, like it could be me. Like I could get sick. I could be in a car accident. Like, I don't know. But I was willing to take that risk. And so he had kind of, shared about like the health piece, that he had struggled through. But he was like, but I'm committed, like he had moved here to Arizona for a job promotion. And that's when we met, after he was here. And so in him moving here, he was like, hey, I'm changing my life. Like I'm gonna hike. And so like when we met, like we were doing all those things and being like very active. And I was like big into like, the nutrition piece and changing that. But like life happens and it's like, oh, tacos sound like great, like a great thing again, let's have some chocolate cake, whatever. Um, and so we definitely let like the lifestyle piece uh become less important, kind of took a back seat. um and it was just kind of enjoying life. But then I was thinking, like, as I watched the stress, I remember thinking like, okay, we've got to change this. um he had been diagnosed in January of 2023 with type 2 diabetes, and I didn't even realize that this was kind of the timeline until after he passed away. Like, I remember he'd gotten some blood work done before the end of the year, but he didn't actually get any results until January. and I found the blood work after he passed away, and I was
Oh,
like,
he didn't tell you?
well, he didn't get it. Like, so he had taken the blood. He had
Oh,
gone
he
and had the
passed
blood.
away before he got the results?
No, he had them, like, in January, but, like,
Okay.
it was basically almost 2 months from him having a blood draw to, like, when he got the results,
Okay,
and that
okay.
shouldn't have happened. Like,
Mhm.
the results came in much quicker, after the blood draw, but, like, the doctor didn't say, like, "Your A1C is 11 point whatever." It was,
Oh,
like,
whoa.
11.4.
Oh my god. It's supposed to be
Um
5 what? 5
Yeah, yeah,
something?
yeah, 5 is kinda, like 5 and below is where you
Mhm.
want it. Um, and so he didn't even know that until January, and then at that point, the doctor was like, "Your A1C is crazy. You could end up having a heart attack because of how high your blood sugar is, like, it will impact you." Um, and Jeff had, like, regular annual exams, for heart stuff, having the heart monitor. And so in January, he had been diagnosed by his GP with type 2 diabetes, got put on metformin, and then it was like lifestyle. And so we were like making those changes where it was like, oh my gosh, like we've got to, it was that reactive response. Um, and so Jeff was starting to make the changes. He was starting to, consider, okay, maybe it is time for a job change. But yeah, we had just come home from a trip in March. We went to the Pac-12 tournament to watch our University of Arizona Wildcats play and win the tournament in Vegas. We came home on a Sunday night. He went to work on Monday. He came home Monday night and said, I think I had a panic attack today. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, is this what it feels like? And he's like, my chest got tight. And he said, I started to feel like kind of some pain in my arm. I felt like I couldn't get my breath. He's like, so I sat down and it had just been a hard day at work, like just a lot of like bad stuff going on. And, him feeling like he was kind of being drugged through the ringer by his boss. Um, and he said he sat down, drank water, took some deep breaths, and he was like, I thought about like maybe I should go to the hospital. He's like, but then it kind of passed. He's like, and I felt like I was okay. He was like, but it felt like a panic attack. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't think I've had a panic attack. And I was like, but I think that sounds like a heart attack. Like,
Yeah.
I think we should go to the hospital. He's like, no, he's like,
Yeah.
I don't think so. He's like, I don't think that it was that. I feel better. Um, And he's like, "I don't wanna go to the hospital, like, I don't wanna spend the night in the hospital." And I was like, "Are you sure?" Like, I feel like, "Can we call the cardiologist?" He's like, "He's gonna tell me to go to the hospital." I'm like, "Well, then maybe we should, like, just go with that." And he was like, "No, like, I'll call in the morning, like, I'm fine." He was like, "I don't feel right, but I'm okay." And we went to bed. And in the middle of the night, and he had a CPAP, and in the middle of the night, I heard like the air, like when the CPAP is on and connected correctly, you can't hear it. And I could hear, and so I thought he was like getting up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, but it stayed on because normally, like, he'll take it off and he'll shut off the machine. So you don't hear all the like, whoosh, the wind, whatever, the air. And it didn't stop. And so I kind of like nudged him and I was like, Jeff, your mask. And he didn't respond. And so I kind of nudged him again. And I was like, Jeff, your machine's not connected. And no response. And so threw the light on. And at that point, I could still see, that like his chest was going up and down, rising and lowering with breath. And then I heard, just kind of like one big, like deep, loud breath. It almost had kind of like a snore type sound to it. And then it just stopped and I called 911 and yeah, so I did chest compressions until they got there. They worked on him for I don't know how long. And I was kind of like freaked out. Like, why aren't they taking him? Like, why are they spending so much time working? Like, get him to the hospital. And I just knew. I just knew like he was already gone. Like I think I saw like his last breath.
Mm.
And yeah, so they came down and I heard them. They made me come downstairs while they worked on him upstairs, and they came down and I heard them call the time.
Oh,
And so I knew when they came down. And yeah,
oh, Erica.
so yeah, and just that blink of an eye, um, and just kind of watching the story unfold. And I had told him so many times, he'd be like up working late. He would not be able to, he never slept well. So he would wake up in the middle of the night, go and work. I'd find him sometimes at his desk at like 2, 3 in the morning. And I would be like, you can't, like, there's no way that you are going to survive on such little sleep. And, and he would be like, I've just got all this stuff to do. And I would tell him, if something happens to you, I promise you, they will move on. They will find a way
Mm,
to get it done. They will find a replacement. I cannot. And I think he was getting it. And right before, and it just breaks my heart, like he had just like sent his resume to a resume professional that like I send to all my clients. I send all my clients too. And so he had gotten his resume updated, and I was like finding jobs on LinkedIn and sending them to him. And he was he had just decided, or I had encouraged him, I was like, I think maybe you should talk to someone about this, like you're not listening to me, clearly. Like, I think you need to talk to someone else. And so he had just started therapy with someone. Um, and, the kicker was like the day that he passed away, like he was supposed to go to therapy after work.
mm.
And, so I had to call the therapist and say, like, he's not coming because he's gone. Calling in, calling his kids. Um,
Oh, God.
so they're in Ohio, calling them at it's 3 o'clock my time, 6 o'clock there. Having to call a sister, like all of it, like just super terrible. And now, just trying to like find my way through it. And, I have some good days and I still have some bad days. And, there are days where I feel angry, that like, hey, like I was encouraging the change, long before this happened. And like, feeling like this could have been prevented.
Mm,
Um, but I mean, I have had such a strong community. My faith is just so important to me. And so like I feel like that's the only reason, when people are like, I cannot believe like how well you're doing this. I'm like, I don't, it's not me. Like honestly, like it's God that's been able to get me through, and my
mhm.
community, like to have people. But yeah, so I've been able to see firsthand. And so when I see clients now that are kind of falling into the same patterns, like I don't want to be like, let me tell you a little story, kids. Like I don't like, here it is. But I do say, like, I know firsthand, like how impactful this can be on your health, and not in a positive way. And
Mhm.
like your body can only do so much. And we have to give it the rest. We have to give it the nutrients. We have to be doing the things to like change our mindset, and our lifestyle. Like we can't continue at a breakneck pace. And for what? Breakneck pace, and for what?
For what? Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, now you
So
have the hindsight. It's horrific to have that hindsight like that
yeah,
and to be like, "Oh, I mean, how do you keep yourself from going there like, "Oh, I wish we would have done that." I mean, I know it doesn't do you any good,
yeah.
but I know that that has to come up for you,
Oh
especially
yeah,
knowing
for
what you
sure.
know. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. And I tell my clients, I literally do this work every single day with you all. And there are times where I recognize full on like that I am going there, in the what ifs, and I wish I would have. I wish he would have.
Mhm.
And it's not, it doesn't change anything. I
It's not
can't bring
helpful.
him back. Um and I've had lots and lots of, good conversations with my therapist about it. And just that, like, I can't change it, but I can learn from it. And
Mhm.
so I feel like it's made me feel even more empowered in the work that I do, in that, like, this matters. The work that I do matters,
Yeah.
and helping people to change their lives so that this isn't their story. Um, and, being able to share my story in, like, this could have been different, and this is what I've learned. And,
Mm.
I refer to like the gifts of Jeff, um, in that it's given me that reminder that life is short,
Mhm.
and we don't know when um it's our time. But, like, what are we doing? First and foremost, like, my thing is, like, what am I doing to make sure that people know that they are loved and that they matter, and that they are cared for by me, making people feel, it's that saying, like, people won't remember, like, the work that you did, but they're going to remember how you made them feel.
Yep.
They're not going to
Yeah.
remember, like, all the stuff that you had, um, but they're going to remember, like, time with you. And so, like,
Mhm.
that's been such a gift for me. The gift in that I can help people to see the impact, um, and to be able to change that for them, and help them to understand that change is possible as well. Um, and even, like, in my current, because of all of this, and, like, what grief, it was almost like my body had just reverted back to that burnout state again. Um, and it felt like there was zero energy. I feel like I'm just kind of, like, coming out of that cloud. So,
Yeah.
like, I'm working with a nutritionist, like, very closely, and um, to be able to change that, and to make sure, like, I'm caring for myself, and that I'm sleeping, that I'm making sure that I'm having those boundaries, that I'm also making time for connection. Um, and yeah, it doesn't help me to go to the place of, like, the what if, and, like,
Yep.
what could I have done differently. um and so when I notice that, the question that I ask myself is, like, but what can I do today?
Oh,
What's
that's
my
so
next
good.
right step today?
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, because actually when I met you, I think you had just gotten married. I think you were a
Pretty
newlywed at that
new.
point. Yeah, because I remember
Yeah,
you
we got
just
married in 2016,
mhm,
right? Yeah, 2016.
mhm, and I just remember you gushing on and showing me pictures, and you were just so happy, and it's, God, your life is just such a full circle moment. I mean, it's so crazy that you've lived your life about burnout and stress, and then you had the ultimate thing happen that
Yeah.
really, I mean, talk about, you know, a wake up call that like you've always known this is for real, but then to
Mhm.
have it just so in your face, like this is
Yeah,
for
literally,
real.
yeah,
This
in
is a
my
big
face, yep.
in your face. And then having to keep yourself from going
Mhm.
there in
And you
this
know what?
moment.
It's interesting, but, like, this is the work that I do, right? I'm the stress expert. I help people, like, recover from burnout, or avoid burnout. Like, this is where I lean into, and that felt very, very, like, I seriously thought, Lauren, about, like, I need to not do this anymore, because clearly I cannot do this. I couldn't help my husband.
Hmm.
And, I'm grateful for the people that were able to say, like, this wasn't on you.
Yeah,
Like,
no.
he made decisions, and this wasn't on you, and you did the best. And the fact that, like, I was able to say, like, clearly you're not taking my advice, like, I think
Hmm.
you should talk to someone else. Um, but, and, like, the way that Jeff was, like, he would much rather, like, I focus on my health, like, yeah, like, you pay for, your nutritionist, you pay for this, you get the support that you need. I don't need to do, like, I don't want to spend the money on that.
Oh,
Like,
he
it's
was
not
saying
important.
that to you? He didn't wanna spend
Yeah.
the money on it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I had, suggested, like, he work with a nutritionist as well, and it was someone that I had worked with in the past, and he was like, "Yeah, like, that just feels kind of expensive," and he was like, "For us to both be doing it," he's like, "I'd rather you do that," and so, like,
Mm,
that weighs on me,
mhm.
um, but, to have, a good counselor that's like, this does not give any indication that you are terrible at your job.
Right.
Like, there is evidence that you have of people that, like, have changed their story and their health.
Yes.
Um, and to have friends, that came alongside and they were like, yeah, like, if you want to make a change, you can, if you feel like that's the thing, but it's not, don't do it because you think you suck. Like, do it
Yeah.
because this is the next right thing for you, like, in this season.
Because, yeah,
Um,
you're important. It's you're a priority. It's good for you to take care of yourself. It's not selfish. It's not
yeah,
expensive. It's not, all the things that we tell ourselves like Jeff did, like, "Oh, I'll do it tomorrow," or
right.
you do it," or, that you're entitled to take care of yourself. I think that we feel that it's selfish in a
Yeah,
lot of
especially
ways.
women. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like the kids, the husband, all the people, coworkers, boss, like,
Yeah.
everybody needs you more than you need yourself.
Mhm. But I
Um,
think it's beautiful that it has been your life work and that you continue
yeah.
to say, okay, maybe I couldn't have helped him because he was a grown person and didn't want
Mhm.
my advice, but I can help other people and I can change their outcomes. So I think that that's commendable and beautiful. I'm so glad that you're doing that because it's so important. I mean, you
Yeah.
are you are the cautionary tale. I mean, you have the cautionary tale,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
to make it
Thanks for
your
saying
life's
that.
work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it's beautiful. So what um I ask these questions at the end like because I think they're so important, but what is your I think I know what you're going to say. I usually know what by the time we come to this point, but what do you think your best advice for people for aging well would be?
Yeah, I think, finding joy in today, finding there's always something to be grateful for. And, when we find those things, there's just something that happens, like, joy begets, more joy. And action comes from that, where you feel like it's possible. And so that's something, in my planner every day, like, what's one thing, that I'm grateful for, but also, like, what's one thing that um, worked really well for me today. And so it can be anything, like, I really had um a good conversation with a friend, like, I was able to catch up with someone. I had a good workout, like, yesterday, like, it was, like, that workout, like, that was awesome, like, I felt that at the end and my energy was up and I was proud of, how I pushed myself in that. But then also, like, I'm grateful for, like, the kindness, the kind people that my children are growing into. I'm grateful for just to have my dog, that's my little companion. Um, Whatever it is, I'm not grateful for the weather right now, Lauren. It's still really hot here. It's
Well,
so
I
hot
know
here.
it's hot here in Austin too.
Well, I guess
What?
it's hot everywhere, so it's
Yeah.
warmer than normal. But
Yeah.
even that, where I'm like, okay, like, I can still be outside,
Yeah.
like,
It's not
um
cold.
yeah, it's not cold. But, like, I'm grateful for the mountains. I'm grateful for fresh air. I'm grateful for the people I work for, whatever it is. Find ways to look for joy, because I think that just does such a wonder for your mindset and changes your perspective throughout the day. It's really hard to have a bad
Mhm.
day when you've thought of all of these things that, like, you're grateful for.
Yeah. I agree. I call it like my friend and I always say, may that like if we go to, well, you know how I eat, girl. I'm like you said, pulling stuff out of my purse to eat, and like if we go to a restaurant, and of course the waiter's going to bring food, and it's going to be how I can't eat it. It'll have oil or whatever, and then they apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry. My friend and I are always like, may that be the worst thing that happened to me today.
Mhm.
Like I don't care. I
Yeah.
really don't
Yeah.
care. I don't stress about any little things like that. I do try to
Mhm.
find the joy in everything, and I think that is it's good advice. You can't go
Mhm.
wrong with just trying to be grateful,
Yeah.
for what
Yeah.
what you do have.
Yeah.
That is good advice for aging well. Do you have one piece of advice that's like, it doesn't have to be age related, but just the best piece of advice you ever received?
I think it's in that, and I got this from. I mean, I don't think she coined it, but Emily P. Freeman. I listened to her podcast, and it's called "The Next Right Thing," and
Oh,
I don't know that she coined the term, but that has been the best thing for me, and that's something that I use literally every day with my clients. Like, but what could the next right thing be?
oh,
You know,
that's
like
so
what's
good.
one next step? And when people are like stuck in like decision fatigue, or like you just feel stuck. It's like, yeah, but what could one next right thing look like?
Yeah.
Um, and is it like that you're just going to drink another glass of water? Is it, that you're going to take yourself out on a walk? Is it
Hmm.
that you're going to connect with someone? Is it that you are going to like book the trip, or whatever it is that, like, what's that next right thing um
Yeah.
for you?
One little
Is
thing,
it
it gets
taking
you
a nap?
unstuck. Yeah,
Yeah.
taking a nap. That could be. Yeah, yeah. That's a
Yeah.
good one. Yeah, because you know what? People do get overwhelmed.
Hmm.
Like, oh, there's so much to do. Okay, well, just do one little, if you just do one little thing and don't focus on the whole thing,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, people get caught up in kind of the big picture piece, and so that's
mm-hmm,
where, like, I pull it way back, where I'm like, we've got the big picture, or like why people can't achieve goals, right? Because they get so
mm-hmm.
stuck in that, like, I'm going to run the marathon I've never run before, and hopefully by this date I can run
Yeah,
26 miles. But it's like, well, we've got to start with one.
yeah,
We've got to start with
yeah.
one.
Well, I normally ask, again, I think I sort of know the answer to this already from what you've said. I normally ask what you've learned from watching your parents age. You could talk about that, but maybe how old was Jeff when he passed away?
57.
57.
Yeah.
And maybe what would you say from watching him age or not get to age?
Yeah, he didn't really get to age,
Hmm.
in the way that uh we thought, we were going to get to see each other age. um but I think, like, stress management matters. um Building a life outside of work matters. um and the gratitude thing, like, I am watching my mom age right now, and she lost, my stepdad in 2021, and that has not been a smooth journey for her. And she struggles with negativity, and
Mm-hmm.
that's been a piece for me to, like, it's so hard to engage with her, because it's like, well, let me tell you about all my problems. And I'm like, this is
She
not.
says that to you?
Oh yeah, like, oh
That's
yeah,
kind of a lot
and
of
yeah.
nerve, don't you
Well,
think?
yeah, yeah. um that's not she's gonna, yeah, I don't think she'll listen, but anyway.
She won't listen to
um
this.
no, yeah, when my husband died, it was like, well, now like what I'm feeling. And I think, like, what she meant was that, like, not like, I don't know that she meant it in a malicious way, but that that's, like, let me tell you about my problems, type of
Wow.
thing. Like, there's just not that connection. But I've seen, like, when negativity is ever present, it impacts everything. I mean, and people don't want to be around you.
Yeah. Yeah.
um and so that's kind of been, me watching it throughout my life, and me
Mhm.
being like, oh no, like my story will be
Mhm.
different. And I want
Mhm.
people to enjoy being around me. And, um, I want to be fun, and I want to bring life to a room. I don't want to be the one
Yes.
like zapping it.
Oh my gosh. I think even with everything you've been through, you are still just such a light. You
Thank
are.
you.
I mean, you've been through so much and you're still just this beautiful light and shining your beautiful light and trying to help other people. And um, do you just have any like words of advice for those who are grieving and maybe
Mm,
kind of stuck and not able to, I mean, I know that you are not taking a forward step every day. I'm sure there's
yeah.
some steps
hmm
back, but do you have any good advice for those who are grieving?
Yeah, I think to allow yourself to feel it. Um, I think, that's kind of, especially like in the work that I do, where people like want the grief gone, right? Um, and I don't necessarily want it gone. And that's been a worry for me. Like, if I lose the grief, like, do I lose the feelings, that I had for him?
Mm,
Do I lose like his memory? And so like that's been like, no, like I want to keep the grief, but not in like a way where like it's weighing me down, or that it feels like this anvil that's on my chest, but that it's a reminder that there's still life to be lived. And I'm still here. And yeah, so what am I doing to have a joyful life? What am I doing to bring joy to others?
mm,
And yeah, so I would say, like, allow yourself to feel the feelings, and allow yourself to experience joy. And that there can be beauty, that comes from ashes. And I don't necessarily have the clear picture for myself yet.
yeah,
I don't know when I will, but I have the faith and the hope that God will do something with this,
yeah.
and that my life is important. And um yeah, that experiencing joy
It,
is critical.
yeah, that seems to be coming up, and still, it's been such a short time for you. A year and a half. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still been such a short time. Like, I think you're gonna look back on this phase, in another
hmm
year and a half and be like, "Wow, I probably was still just in a cloud of like
hmm
you are moving forward and you're doing
hmm
great." But I think that even like I said, in another year and a half, you're gonna look back and be like, "Wow, I was still so, you know,
Yeah. No, for sure. I
I
mean, that's
mean,
been like a vision that I've had, where like I know that there will come a point. I don't know when. Like, is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? 20? I don't know. But I know that there will come a point where I will be able to look back and say, like, wow, like how far I've come. And
yeah."
like, yeah, you know,
I think every day. I think, well, you're doing it. That's all I can say is whatever wherever you are, you're doing it. You constantly amaze me. So, I
oh,
thank you so
thanks.
much for talking to me today. I love you just so
Thanks for
much.
having me.
Oh,
This was
it's
such a
my
joy, and
pleasure. It
you're
is a
such a
joy.
joy.
What books are you reading right now before we go?
Oh
Cuz
gosh,
we always
so
have to talk
many.
about that.
I'm reading a
So
book
many.
called Long Island Compromise, and that is giving me anxiety. Like, it's just like,
What
people that
is
are
it?
making a lot of bad decisions in life.
Oh,
Yeah, it's kind of
it's
like,
fiction?
it's fiction. Yeah, it's like, rich people behaving badly type of stuff.
Long
It's
Island
good.
Compromise. Ooh.
Yeah, it's good, but I find I have to put it down for a few days because I'm like, oh, um, I am, gosh, like what else? I'm re-listening to this book called The 12-Week Year. I read that years ago, and it's had such an impact on me, but I wanted to listen to it this time. Um, and that's just kind of like goal setting, and what you can do
Mhm.
in a quarter.
Mhm.
And so, I kind of work in that framework of like quarter goals with my clients. It just feels a lot easier than, in the next 12 months, this is what you're going to do. But that
Yes.
there's like forward progress that's happening.
Yeah, yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
listening to that. I'm listening to another book called Station 11. That's kind of like a dystopian novel. Um, that's good. That's not like a genre that I typically enjoy. Fantasy dystopian, I don't know, but this one, like so many people talk about Emily St. John Mandel and the books that she writes, and Station 11 comes up so often. And so I was like, all right, it was available on the Libby app
So
through
you
the
got it.
library, and so here I am. And yeah, always reading books about like health and stuff, and
Hmm. I know.
yeah,
I know. We always, I know that was one of the things we bonded over, that we always are reading like 5 books at a time. And I will
yeah.
tell you, I love doing this podcast so much, but it has put a little kink in my habit of reading all the books, because now I'm having to read all the books for my guests, which are
Hmm.
generally good. But, it's now I'm not able to read as many books of my choosing. But it's kind of cool because I'm reading a lot of um, health books and things
Hmm.
like that, just from the
Yeah.
guests. So,
Well, you're welcome.
uh,
I didn't have a book for you to read, so maybe this gives you a little break,
no,
and you,
yeah. Well, I'm gonna be taking a little trip, and so I'm gonna download some of these and
yeah,
read them on my trip.
highly
All right,
recommend.
I love you. Thank you, Erica.
I love you.
Take care. Bye
Thanks. You
bye.
too.
Thanks for listening, friend. From my heart to yours, be well until we meet again.